Welcome. Today, we're going to go on a little journey, a journey that takes us from a huge mess of raw, confusing data all the way to clear, strategic business decisions. We are going to break this whole thing down step by step.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Think about it. Every single day, businesses are just flooded with information. Sales figures, customer feedback, operational metrics, you name it. But the real challenge, the real game changer, is turning that mountain of data into actual real-world value. So you gotta ask yourself, are your big decisions being driven by solid insight, or are you just going with your gut?
So, we're going to start with a problem that I think pretty much everyone can relate to, having way too much information and nowhere near enough clear answers. It feels like you're drowning. To make this super real, just imagine for a second you're part of an accounting firm. You've been tasked with auditing a company that has, get this, 50,000 separate transactions from the last year. Trying to manually check every single one, it's not just impractical, it's completely impossible. You would literally be there forever.
So where do you even begin? How in the world can you find the meaningful insights, or maybe the critical errors, without getting totally lost in all that noise? Well, the first step, and this is absolutely crucial, is to stop trying to analyze everything.
Right, so instead of trying to look at the entire universe of data, we need to be smarter about it. We have to be more strategic. And that brings us to our first really powerful technique, sampling. Now, sampling isn't about looking at less data just for the sake of it, to save time. No, it's about looking at the right data. The whole goal here is to select a smaller group that acts like a perfect miniature of the entire population. That way, you get a really reliable picture of the whole thing. And this is not guesswork, okay? It's a very systematic process. You have to define your population, create your list, choose your method, and figure out your sample size before you even touch the data. That rigor, that process, is what makes the whole thing work. And check this out. This is how it plays out in that audit example we talked about. Instead of just sampling randomly, the auditors get clever. They stratify the data. They check 100% of the high-value transactions, because that's where the biggest risk is. But then they only look at a tiny fraction of the low-value ones. This makes the audit incredibly efficient and so much more effective. Okay, so we've got our sample, but now we run smack into what I like to call the dirty secret of data analysis. Raw data is almost always messy. It's inconsistent, it's full of errors, it's just a mess. The very first part of cleaning up this mess is something called data coding. This is basically where you translate all those human answers from, say, a survey into numerical values that your software can actually understand and process. You're essentially teaching the computer what the answers mean. So yeah, coding gets the data into the system, which is great. But just because it's in a spreadsheet doesn't mean it's clean, not by a long shot. To really see the incredible financial impact of this next step, the cleaning part, let's look at a case study from a bank that's processing loan applications. So, the bank starts out with a sample of 5,200 raw loan applications. And of course, they are filled with potential typos, duplicate entries, missing information, all the classic signs of really messy data. But here's the key part. The analysis team doesn't just throw up their hands and ignore these problems. No way. They systematically go through the data. They find and remove duplicates, they correct typos, they intelligently fill in missing income based on other clues, and they get rid of applications that just plain don't make sense. And by doing all this, they dramatically improve the quality of their entire data set. And here is the payoff. All that meticulous cleanup work, it wasn't just about being tidy. It actually improved their analytical model's accuracy by 12%. And that 12% allowed the bank to save an estimated $2.3 million a year just by avoiding bad loans. That is the power of clean data. All right, so with clean, reliable data in our hands, we can finally get to the really fun part. We can start asking the big questions and finding the story that's been hidden inside all those numbers this whole time. Even simple choices here really matter. Take the mean versus the median. It's a classic financial example, right? You have a few multi-million-dollar accounts in your bank, and they can pull the average, the mean, balance way up to something like $45,000. But the median, the person exactly in the middle of the pack, only has $12,000. So the median gives you a much more realistic picture of your typical customer. And visuals. Visuals are just incredibly powerful. Our brains are hardwired to see patterns. A scatter plot, like the one you see here, lets us instantly see the relationship between two different things. Just by looking at the upward trend of those dots, you could quickly see if, for example, a retail store's size has a strong positive connection to its sales. And beyond just visuals, we can actually test these relationships with statistics. So in this table, we're asking a pretty simple question. Is there a real link between a customer's credit score and whether their loan gets approved? I mean, just looking at the numbers, you can already see a pretty clear pattern starting to emerge, can't you?
And boom, a statistical test, in this case it's called a chi-square test, confirms what our eyes were already telling us. You can think of it as a mathematical way to prove a pattern isn't just a fluke. This test shows the relationship is so strong that there's less than a 0.1% chance it happened by random luck. It gives us statistical certainty.
And all of this, every single step we've just walked through, brings us to the final part of the journey. And frankly, it's the most important one, turning all of our analysis into real, tangible action.
You see, that analysis of store performance doesn't just sit in a report on someone's desk. It becomes a strategic roadmap. The data tells them which stores are crushing it and which ones are struggling. So what can they do? They can learn from the best, and they can provide targeted help to the rest. The data is actively driving their business decisions.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? It's this. Mastering this process empowers you to move beyond just gut feelings and instinct. It allows you to make decisions that are backed by cold, hard evidence. And that gives you and your business a powerful, almost unfair competitive edge. So the real question isn't whether you have data, it's what strategic story is it waiting to tell you.